All right, let's dive right into the world of mental health support. Now, it's a landscape that can get pretty confusing, right? You've got all these different titles and roles flying around. We're going to clear all that up today and really zero in on one specific field, counseling psychology. So let's get into it.
This is the big question, isn't it? I mean, you've probably heard these terms used pretty much interchangeably, but they are actually very distinct professions. They have different training, different approaches. It's a super common point of confusion, but stick with me, and by the end of this, you are going to have it all sorted out.
Okay, so first things first, let's get right down to what counseling psychology actually is. We're not just talking about, a friend giving you some good advice over coffee. This is a formal, regulated field, and it has some really rigorous standards.
Now, the key thing to remember here is the focus. Counseling psychology isn't just about digging into problems. It's really about empowering people. The whole goal is to help individuals tap into their own strengths, their own resources, to navigate all the challenges life throws at them, whether they're big or small.
And believe me, this is not a career someone just decides to do one weekend. The path is pretty demanding. It all starts with a solid academic degree in psychology, and then you've got specialized training on top of that. And crucially, there are hundreds of hours of supervised practice they have to complete before they can even think about getting a license. The main takeaway? This is a highly trained profession. So now let's get into the human side of all this. What is it that actually drives someone to become a counselor? And on the flip side, what leads the rest of us to go looking for their help? It really boils down to some pretty fundamental human motivations. Researcher Jeffrey Kotler looked into this, and what he found is that a deep-seated desire to help is often right at the core. People are just drawn to this kind of work because they have a natural knack for it. They get immense satisfaction from making a real impact, and honestly, in a lot of ways, helping other people gives them a much richer perspective on their own lives. And you might think, oh, it's just about talking. How hard can it be? But don't be fooled. Counseling programs are incredibly challenging. They're not just about memorizing theories from a textbook. The real test is whether you can take all that knowledge and actually translate it into effective, real-world action with a client. So what about the other side of the coin? Why do people like you and me end up seeking help? Well, the reasons are pretty much as varied as life itself. Often, they're things we all face at some point. Navigating the grief of losing someone, figuring out how to manage anxiety, dealing with tough relationship issues, or even just learning better ways to handle day-to-day stress. This is a big one. What actually goes on behind that closed door? It can feel like a total black box if you're on the outside looking in, but there's a pretty well-defined process that's designed to create real, meaningful change. You can kind of think of it as a journey, and it usually follows these key stages. It all kicks off with figuring out your goals. Like, why are you really here? Then, and this is so important, you build a foundation of trust. From that safe place, you can start to explore the real issues, challenge the old patterns that just aren't working anymore, and finally, you actively practice new, healthier ways of thinking and behaving. And this is so common. This quote from a brand new client just captures a huge misconception perfectly. A lot of people walk in thinking the counselor has some kind of magic wand to just, fix their problems. There's this real uncertainty about what's actually going to happen. And then you have the counselor's perspective, which just illustrates the real role so beautifully. It's not about being a fixer. It's about creating a totally unique kind of space, one that is completely safe, completely non-judgmental, and built on just listening carefully. And that safety, that's what makes real exploration and change possible. Okay, so let's circle back to that first big question we had and draw some really clear lines in the sand. Lots of professionals are out there trying to help, but they all have different specializations and different ways of doing things. Before we get to the side-by-side comparison, it's super important to understand what makes therapeutic counseling, unique. A huge difference is its focus on prevention and development. It's often about helping people navigate life's adjustments, going to college, getting married, changing careers, rather than treating severe mental illness from a purely medical point of view. And this table just lays it all out nice and clear. So, counselors, they're typically working with people on the problems of daily living and adjustment. Psychologists, on the other hand, they often diagnose and treat more severe mental disturbances. And then you have psychiatrists, who are medical doctors. They can prescribe medication and really focus on the medical management of psychological conditions. Each role is totally distinct and totally vital. So, how did counseling even become this regulated profession we see today? You might be surprised to learn that the roots of this profession go way, way back. We're talking thousands of years. Let's trace that journey for a minute.
I mean, the whole idea started with people like philosophers and religious leaders. But then you get this huge scientific leap forward with Hippocrates, who created the very first system for classifying mental disorders. Fast forward a few centuries, and you've got giants like Freud and Rogers building the foundations of modern practice. And that all leads to this critical moment in 1981, the creation of an official accreditation council, which set the standards for training that we still use today.
And that's the whole point, right? This whole process of standardization, creating clear educational requirements, supervised practice, ethical codes, that is what has transformed counseling into the respected, autonomous profession that it is. It's what has earned the trust of clients and also of colleagues in all those other fields. So, I want to leave you with this one last thought. We talked about how counseling often uses a developmental framework, right? Seeing challenges as just part of life's journey instead of a purely medical problem that needs to be cured. So, thinking about that, how might adopting that kind of developmental perspective change the way you look at the everyday hurdles and transitions in your own life? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning